We
Right.
frequently dedicate our learning in honor of people. She wrote to me today. My friend Vardith Schwartz, grandmother of hostage Avinatan Benditza Tirza, was Nifteret. So we're dedicating our learning in her memory and in honor of all of the hostages as well, and hoping that they come home b'mhera
Amen.
b'yameinu.
Amen. 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 All right, certainly, certainly, and I would also add a tefillah that that war does not break out in the north of Israel, and that whatever happens, everybody really is just remains safe, and it's just a time. I know that all of
It's
our thoughts are with Achenu and Achiotenu b'nei Israel. Yes, yeah.
okay.
All right. So we will be doing today something very practical, which is questions that I get pretty frequently, both for Tisha B'av and for Yom Kippur, multiple times already just in the last week. Even though people did not know that I was giving this talk, I've people reaching out. I'm pregnant. My wife is pregnant. I just had a baby. I'm nursing. Do I have to fast on Tisha B'av? I loved the way that one person framed it to me when they reached out to me a few days ago. They said, "I gave birth a few weeks ago, and I'm nursing, and I wanted to know if you're the right person to ask whether I should be fasting on Tisha B'av," which is
That's
basically
funny.
like, I need somebody who's going to tell me that I don't have to fast. And I'm not going to ask you what the halacha is because then I'll be bound by your answer. So I want to know in advance whether you're the right person to be asking.
That's kind of
Um,
amusing.
say again?
It's kind of amusing to me.
Yes, yes, of course. But it was such a beautifully way to frame the question. Anyway, and I have to be honest, that for many, many years, I was like, I was, you know, I don't know if I'd say strict, but I would say it was like sort of party line because as we're going to see, the party line is you look in Shulchan Aruch and it says, barring special circumstances, obviously, if there's special reasons and issues to be concerned and so on, it would be different. But, the standard rule is that pregnant and nursing women fast not only on Yom Kippur, but even on Tisha B'Av. It's straight halach and Shulchan Aruch. And, if you're like, well, I don't know, my mother always used to fast when I was growing up. Nobody ever asked a Shaila, pregnant and nursing women would fast on Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur. I mean, obviously Tisha B'Av is less weighty. It's not a doraita, but, nevertheless, it's a straight psak and Shulchan Aruch. So, it would really be a question of why should this be a case of special consideration? And over the years, in talking to people and talking to women and so on, I became much more sensitive. It wasn't just people. Look, if somebody doesn't want to be doing the halacha, then they won't do the halacha. When people are asking a shaila, it's because they're committed to the halacha. And these are people that aren't just looking for an excuse, make my life easy. They're definitely about, so I mean, if they're pregnant, about the health of their fetus, obviously, and if they're nursing, about their ability to provide, milk to their child, to their baby, and these are real concerns and genuine concerns, and even if how do you deal with the fact that the halacha does not seem to reflect those? But these are real issues, and particularly, like I said, when you're dealing with Tisha B'av and not Yom Kippur, which is not a doraita fast, and you're dealing with real concerns about real health issues. And I was very pleased that I don't know exactly when it was. Maybe it was about 10 years ago or so. I discovered a tshuva of Rav Nachum Rabinovich, who was the Zichrono Livracha. He passed away a few years ago. He was the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat Ma'aleh Adumim in Israel, and recognized as like a very, I would say, independent thinker and posek. Although his psakim really only began to become known, he only really became to be known like in the last. I mean, he was always known as a Rosh Yeshiva, but in terms of somebody like his halachic voice, only in like the last few years of his life, and then after he's passed away. And we actually just ran in July a kolo for psak for people that have smicha, like our musmachim, other, from other yeshivot, some, men, women. And one of the people that was sort of teaching in that kola was Rav Rav Yoni Rosenzweig, who's a Talmud of Rav Rabinovich, and he gave a few classes on Rav Rabinovich's approach to halacha. And he sort of said that like Rav Rabinovich on the one hand was sort of very independent, and at the same, like he just sort of said, this is of course like what the halacha is saying. It was like obvious if that's what the halacha was saying. He didn't care whether other people said it or not, and at the same time, he didn't think that anything that he was saying was a chiddush because he just thought it was obviously what the halacha. It was clear that that was what was true from the terms of, in terms of the halacha. Anyway, so I found that he had written a tshuva that about pregnant and nursing women fasting on Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av, where he actually is significantly more lenient than the party line in terms of what it seems to be the straight psak in the Shulchan Aruch. And we won't focus on Yom Kippur, we'll focus on Tisha B'Av. Yom Kippur, of course, in order to allow somebody to not fast and to eat an amount, like as I'm sure you all know, if somebody has a health issue on Yom Kippur, the first stage is like eat less than the shir, less than a minimum amount, or drink less than a minimum amount, and do it with a certain degree of spacing, so it's not considered like you directly broke the fast. And then, but under some circumstances, when it's needed, you obviously don't do that when it's a real concern about something that could be potentially life-threatening. But for Yom Kippur, you have to.
I said to interrupt, but there are actually you can purchase in some very frimmy places, a whole set of waters that have been pre-measured. Okay, and they say, oh, this is less than the shear, and then you can, take one every 15 minutes or whatever, every 20 minutes.
Right. I'm not
this
surprised.
is all dosed out.
Sure. I'm not surprised. So anyway, but for the Yom Kippur argument, you have to be talking about why it's a possibility of a risk of life of the mother or of the fetus. For Tisha B'Av, logically, you should not need that argument. So we're going to bracket the Yom Kippur part, which is a whole other type of a conversation, and just focus on the Tisha B'Av aspect of it. That at one level, right, logically, because it's not a doraita fast, you don't need to argue that anybody's life is at risk. And on the other hand, you have to deal with the fact that the straightforward halacha says that you're supposed to fast. So how exactly, do you navigate this? And one more preparatory word before we begin to look at sources, which is, Rav Rabinovich was not the only person that, the only posek that was more makil than the party line when it came to issues relating to health. It's well known that Chaim Soloveitchik, not the one who is alive, but Rav Yosef Tov Soloveitchik's grandfather, the head of the Brisker dynasty, he was extremely lenient when it came to any concern about health, like Shabbos or Yom Kippur, and readily sort of say, violate Shabbos if there's any concern of health, and more than it would seem from the straightforward reading of the halacha. And he would say, don't say that I'm lenient, I'm makil on Shabbos. I'm a very big machmir on pikuach nefesh. I'm very, very strict on the mandate to protect life. But it's always there, there has always been poskim that are really willing to, be much more lenient than the simple halacha might appear, because when there's any concern of like health issues. And I believe, I'm not sure this is true, and I'm not sure, it's true, and I'm not sure it was about Rav Rabinovich, but I believe I heard that Rav Rabinovich actually came out with his psak about, because I think it was a case where it was like a Yom Kippur case, and it was a pregnant woman and whatever, and he told her to fast, and then it was something that, like, I think it was like some narrowly averted tragedy, like she almost lost the baby or something like that, and then that sort of forced him to really like reassess his whole position about this. And that's true. Like when you're really confronted, it's all nice to be in the base medrash and worrying about here's what it says in Shulchan Aruch and so on. But if you make a psak and it leads to something irreversible in terms of a person's life or their baby's life, there's no coming back from that. So that obviously is something that it's very under you appreciate why the poskim. It's an interesting balance that the poskim have to face, right? Because if in 900, how do you deal with it? If like 999 cases out of 1,000, obviously the person should fast and there's no, risk at all. But in one case of 1,000, it would represent a risk. Then where does that sort of put you? Do you say, well, then nobody should fast? Or you say everybody's going to fast, but then what's going to happen to that one person in 1,000? And you could say, well, you try to assess each case on its own terms, but maybe there are things that you're not able to assess, and actually the decision to fast will lead to something tragic, and there would have been no way of knowing in advance. So it really, puts so they really can speak about the weightiness of this type of a decision, and you could sort of understand the poskim that say, look, under normal circumstances, there's no reason to fast. And then you can also really appreciate the poskim that say, I'm not taking a risk, because, so anyway, those are some of the inherent tensions that are present. So what I'd like to do is to look at like I said, the sources. And before we get to the tshuva, we'll start with some sources, about the earlier sources, and you'll just see what the lay of the land was that Rav Rabinovich was sort of entering into. So let's take a look. I'm going to open this up. Where are we? Let's take a look. Hold on.
Can you make it bigger, please?
Yeah, I was about to do that. It's 125, but I think last time people appreciated when it was 150. All right, is that good? Yeah, visible?
Can we do it a little bit
now,
bigger?
Even bigger than that? Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, that's better. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I want to say that some of the first sources before the tshuva I have with running English translation. The earlier sources that I just put together a little while ago, I did not have a chance to provide the English translation. So we won't spend a lot of time on them, but I did want you to see them. I think it's important to see the lay of the land as it precedes the actual tshuva of Rav Rabinovich. So here we have a Gemara in Psachim. We'll start with source number 1. And the Gemara says like this, okay? Amar Shmuel, Ein Ta'anit Tzibor beBavel Ela Tisha B'Av Bilvad. That the stringencies of a public fast, the public fast days of the Gemara were primarily the fast days of Masechet Ta'anit. They were the days in which there would be fasts because of lack of rain. And then when it would go, many, many weeks or whatever with no rain, you do increasingly more serious fasts. And then you would have a big public fast, which would start the night before, and nobody would work that day. And it would be like the weightiest fast would be the Ta'anit Tzibur. And Shmuel said the only one outside of Israel is when, they have a whole agricultural society, they're praying for rain. Outside of Israel, we only have like historical fasts. We don't have fasts because of lack of rain. And the only one that has the weightiness of a Ta'anit Tzibur that, is Tisha B'Av. So the Gemara says, well, what do you mean the weightiness of a Ta'anit Tzibur? So the main word is it says presumably it means that it starts already from sunset, and that's the weightiness of it, and it doesn't even start, it doesn't start in the morning, it starts the night before, it starts from sunset. We don't have to worry about that, but the Gemara goes into that discussion. In the context of that discussion of whether Tisha B'Av begins at sunset or only when the stars come out, the Gemara quotes has the following statement. This is what's important for us. Darish Rava expounded, Ubarot umenikot, pregnant women and nursing women, mit'anot umashlimot bo. It's a straightforward, unambiguous statement. They fast and they do the whole fast on Tisha B'Av. Kiderach shemitarmot umashlimot Yom Kippurim, just like they do on Yom Kippur. Oh, and by the way, also which was the reason the Gemara was quoting it, because it also starts the night before and it starts already from sunset. But here you have an unambiguous statement that pregnant and nursing women fast on Tisha B'Av. Period. End of story. Okay. Rambam says the same thing. You can't ask for a more straightforward statement. Nursing and pregnant women fast on Tisha B'Av. Okay, and a full fast. Okay. We can look at Shulchan Aruch first in Tov Kuf Nun, where it's dealing with the minor fasts. Some Gedalia, Shivasar B'Tammuz. So the Shulchan Aruch writes the following: Arbat Samot Alalu. These four minor fasts, everybody has to do them. Basur Lifrotz Geder. It's forbidden to to violate the norm. And then the Ramah says, however, this is the minor fast, like Tzom Gedalia and Shivasar B'Tammuz. If you are pregnant or nursing, Shemitzta'arod Harbeh, that you're in a lot of pain. Notice also special circumstance, not just straight pregnant and nursing, but Mitzta'arod Harbeh, you're in a lot of pain. Ain Lihitanot, they should not fast on these minor fasts. And then he acknowledges even if they're not in pain, nursing and pregnant women, they really don't have to fast on these minor fasts. But the practice is to be strict. But the real halacha is nursing and pregnant women are off the hook from these minor fasts. But really we're talking about 3 out of the 4. Tzom Gedalia, Shivasar B'Tammuz, and a third Davis. But on Tisha B'Av, they have to do the whole fast, nursing and pregnant women. He doesn't say what happens if they're nursing and pregnant and mitzvah harbei on Tisha B'Av, but certainly, by the other fasts we accept that they don't have to, but Tisha B'Av, sorry, they have to. And then it said much more just plainly here in laws of Tisha B'Av. Same thing, quoting the Gemara, nursing and pregnant women fast on Tisha B'Av like they do on Yom Kippur, okay, but not on the minor fasts, all right? So that's basically the halacha. Now, I want to show, right, so it seems like there's no conversation. I wanted to show one key line that counterbalances it. Maybe I should have actually shown it from the Shulchan Aruch itself, but here it is in, let me just pause a second. I'm just going to look this up and find you. I was going to show you from the Tur. The Tur is the source that precedes the Shulchan Aruch, but let me actually just find it in the, here, okay? Okay, hold on, let me just.
Rabbi Linzer, I know doesn't it seem odd to you that they didn't consider the women's health in these things? I mean, it just, in other words, they're thinking about it, and it never occurred to them that, wow, this could actually harm the baby or the mother.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's exactly sort of the point that, that Rav Rabinovich, the space.
I understand that. What I'm saying is
right.
That Chazal was, Chazal was, was sensitive, should have been sensitive to these things.
Right, but they figured maybe a special circumstance is different, but but in one, what do you call it? But one day of fasting. Now, again, if you're not doctors and you're not I don't know, but that's exactly the space we have to step in, is to say, well, now we're more aware of the medical issues and we're understanding that, how these things can impact, how it is that they were not, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer of how, you could, let's hold off that question. Let's get back to it, okay? Because there's going to be, I'm going to bracket that question, because the claim is going to be, well, the situation is different nowadays. Meaning, I'm going to pause. Remind me, and I'm going to get back to that. I just but let me just look here at the next seif in Shulchan Aruch. I just pasted it into source 4. Okay, but I want to show you the contrast. Chaya, kol shloshim yom. Chaya here means a woman who has just given birth. Okay, for the first 30 days after childbirth. V'chein cholesh hu tzarich lechol, and also a sick person who says they need to eat. Ein sarich omed. You don't need to bring in a doctor to assess how much do they really, is it really clear that they need to eat or not. Ella ma'achilin oto miyad. Whether it's a woman who just gave birth or somebody who is sick, you just feed them. Because they did not apply this to somebody who was sick, right? This fast only applies to healthy people, did not apply to sick people. It's not like, well, you're violating it, and we have to decide if you're sick enough to allow it to be violated. It's more like fundamentally, this fast was never meant to apply to sick people. So if you're sick, we don't have to do any assessment. The fast does not apply to you. This is Tisha B'Av. Go ahead and eat. So this really sort of sharpens Bert's question, right? Because it's like a no-brainer if somebody is sick, that they go ahead and eat. You don't have to say, well, I think I can manage it. It's not a question of whether you can manage it or not. You're sick, you don't fast on Tisha B'Av. So how do you reconcile that with somebody who is pregnant and nursing? And, it would seem that reflects an understanding that somebody who's pregnant and nursing, we don't consider them to be, to be in barring special circumstances, we don't consider them to be unwell. We don't consider them to be in a precarious situation. That was just the perception. So when the perception changes and you understand that, that's not the case, then that's a way to bring, Seif Hey here into Seif Vav, which is essentially what Rabinovich does. But let's read his tshuva, and then we can discuss, like go back to that question that Bert raises. Okay. So let's take a look here at the tshuva, and we're going to skip the part that has to do mostly with the Yom Kippur. All right. So we're going to start here. This is a tshuva. He published it in Tchumim about. Let me just tell you what the date was. Hold on. I had that up. Where was it? All right, I can find you. I think I closed the window. But he published it in Tchumim, I think, a good 30 years ago. All right. So here's what he writes. A Mishnah b'Yoma. We have a Mishnah in Masechet Yoma. Dana al isha me'uberet al chola b'Yom Kippurim. Be'elu mikrim mutar lehem lechol. Under what circumstances can a sick person or a pregnant woman eat on Yom Kippur? The Kovat, and it establishes ubra shehevicha. If a woman who was pregnant smelled some alluring, odor, and she has she feels this, this strong need to eat, okay, you feed her until she settles down. And Rashi explains, and if she doesn't eat, both of them, the mother and the child, misukanim, will be in danger. Okay. So in special circumstances, they're allowed to eat because she's allowed to eat because we have now seen that it's a special circumstance that shows us that there could be a danger if we don't do something. But what becomes clear is if it's not a special circumstance, like that it's decided that she's particularly precarious or she has this desire that suddenly overtook her, but it's a normal situation of a pregnant woman. A pregnant woman has to fast. That's the norm. Tisha B'Av, right? It's only a special case that she can break the fast on Yom Kippur. When it comes to Tisha B'Av, we teach, and this is what we just looked. So he says, let's be honest. Let's start at the beginning. The party line, the standard halacha, explicit in the Gemara, and I also showed you explicit in the Rambam and Shulchan Aruch, is that a pregnant and pregnant and nursing woman fast on Yom Kippur. Okay. Now, however, he says, let's go ahead, and I'm sorry that there's some noise out there. I don't know what to do with it. Hold on. Wait a minute. Sorry. 1 second. Okay. I'm sorry. I think my mic stopped working. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. All right. I think I had,
fine.
okay, fine. All right. Now, okay. So now he's going to say that's the standard halacha. Now let's talk about revising. All right. And the first thing he wants to say is this point about should we just consider a nursing and a pregnant woman in the same category as a chola of a sick person, right? I mean, the very halacha we just saw that said a chola doesn't fast on Tisha B'Av, but a nursing and pregnant woman does, makes it clear that the standard halacha assumes that we don't put them in that same category. But now he's going to try to sort of, bring together an argument that we should see them as in the same category. So he says the following. Let's look at their standing of the nursing and pregnant woman compared to sick people. For Pazak Hamar Sham, I'm going to quote you a source, right? He just, it's a little cherry picking. I'm going to quote one source that says that they have a standard as a sick person. And he bring a couple of indications that we're in scattered indications that halacha prepares to see them as the same status. Not that they are sick, but they're in their halachic status is the same as a sick person. Rashi, ubrod cholote, and he quotes Rashi. Pregnant women are considered as those that are sick. Okay, and also Rashi says here, stam nashim ubrod cholot. Normal women who are pregnant are in the category of sick people. Okay, and they eat special things in order to strengthen themselves. They have to be on a special diet. There's a reason pregnant women see doctors on a regular basis. Their health or their baby's health, is not that, has to be pay much more closer attention to it. Okay. So that by pregnant women, there's a lot of evidence that halacha sees them as, people that need to be special attention to their health and would be in a similar category as a sick person. Asher leminika, when it comes to a nursing woman, look at Ksuvot ala Mishnah, Amrisham. Okay, so there's a question about a husband's obligation to provide food for his wife. That's a general marital obligation. And the Gemara says, and it says he's obligated to do it, even when they're nursing and so on. And the Gemara says, well, maybe part of the point here is that when women are nursing, they're like they're sick. And it's and it's maybe telling us something about his obligation to feed them, to provide them special foods, even when they're sick. Okay. And then he goes on and says, that's just a possibility in the Gemara. Maybe it's telling us that we should look at pregnant women as if they're sick. All right. And then he tries to sort of acknowledge that the Gemara is not saying that explicitly, but maybe that is Gemara that indicates that it's prepared to look at nursing women as if they're sick. So we should just pause right now and acknowledge, that it is not the strongest evidence that from the Gemara at least, that a nursing woman should be seen as somebody who is sick. By a pregnant woman, there are more scattered sources that seem to say it. But by a nursing woman, he quotes one little line in a Gemara, and I didn't even want to read the rest of the paragraph. It gets way too convoluted to try to say that maybe the Gemara sees a nursing woman as sick. It's really very hard to try to demonstrate that. Okay. So now let's keep on going. Okay. And let's take a look now at what he said. So that's argument number one. Let's try to put them in the same category as somebody who is sick and tries to bring some scattered references from Gemara to say that. Of course, if halacha really had done that, we never would have gotten to the rulings we had, that a sick person eats on Tisha B'Av, but a pregnant and a nursing woman does not, right? So, what's he exactly trying to do? It's clear that those halachot don't see them in the same category. So let's leave that as right now as a question without yet an answer. All right, but everybody gets what he's trying to do, right? He's trying to say halachically we'll categorize them as sick, and we know a sick person can eat on Tisha B'Av, but he has not told us how he deals with the fact that the halacha is clearly not seeing them as the same because it's putting them in different categories. All right, everybody good with the point number one of what he's trying to demonstrate? Yes? Is everybody with me here? Yes,
Yes.
good? Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Now he's going to take an argument about, let's switch gears. Let's not focus on the mother status and is she sick and she should be eating because she's sick. Let's talk about the baby status, okay? And that you have to be concerned about a pregnant or nursing woman to eat on even Yom Kippur, but let's talk about Tisha B'Av, just to ensure the health of the fetus, okay, or of the baby. So this seems to be really the much more powerful argument, right? Like if there was no concern about the health of the fetus in either of those cases, you could say, okay, I get it. You're not feeling great. You have some nausea. You're a little sick or whatever. Okay, but the halacha is pregnant and nursing women are supposed to eat. Like it's not. I mean, again, I don't mean to sound unsympathetic, but like it wouldn't necessarily push you so much to argue against the party line if we were not thinking about, a serious health concern. And the more obvious, immediate, serious health concern is about the fetus. So let's see what he says about that. And here's what he talks about. And here could be why we could say that we're willing to change what the halacha is from what the party line seems to be. Okay, so let's take a look. Lo rak ala ein yesh ladon. The discussion is not just about the rak. Yesh ladon gam mamadu shalavlan. What's the story about the fetus? Okay, chasab b'chochol kedolo, the truth in the kedolo, which is an early Gaonic word, and he makes a whole quote, and he says, "Olemi divrei hu yesh sikun shetei aker ubar." If there's any concern that there might be a miscarriage, afilu hi b'tchilat ha'hirayon, and I think we all accept this for granted, even if it's just immediately after conception, you would violate Yom Kippur even if the fetus was just, a few days old, if there's any concern of a miscarriage. Even though the fetus is not yet a full life, it's enough of a pikuach nefesh to go to eat on Yom Kippur. And now here comes what really allows him to talk about why the halacha will be different than how it appears in terms of the Shulchan Aruch. Bizman ha'acharon gilu harofim. In recent years, doctors have, have discovered shemin hachodesh hachamishi v'hala. That's from the 5th month onward. Hasikuyim hein nikarim shatzom yigrom hitkavsut harecha. There is significant likelihood that that fasting will cause to contractions of the womb. Kolomar, shavlad yakem mimkomo v'tiyah pala rachmana litzlan. And if you fast from the 5th month on, it could cause an early, birth, and which could cause a miscarriage, God forbid. Oh, but mikra hachitov, or if it's not a miscarriage, later mukdemes, it would still be a birth, well in advance of when the due date was. And we know that, a child that's born, premature, there's a lot of dangers in terms of the health of the child. So now we know that fasting from the 5th month on can really lead to serious risk of early of miscarriage or of premature birth. Okay. Okay. And then he goes on and on and says that. So we don't need to read the rest of it. So what he is saying is that here is why, when we're dealing at least with a pregnant woman, I am prepared to be more lenient than what you normally find in the text, because we now know better. Now we know from a medical perspective that fasting can cause early birth, can cause miscarriage, or what do you call it, or a premature birth, and that's a real pikuach nefesh. And that really leads him to basically say, as we'll see in the conclusion, that even on Yom Kippur, because we're dealing with a risk of life, from the 5th month on, women should be not fasting, or at least maybe shiurim, like unless there's something special, Okay, so you don't want to, but so you'll do less than a shear, but actually to be, even, to immediately consider the case to be one of pikuach nefesh. That's what he says about pregnant. How about nursing? So he says like this: when it comes to a nursing woman, if a child will be endangered with the absence of getting mother's milk, even if the nursing woman is totally healthy, so we're not concerned about her health. But if she fasts, it will mean that she will not be able to provide milk for the child. She should not fast on Yom Kippur because it is a risk of life. That even though this source that the Chassam Sofer quoted, did not bring a proof. The Chassam Sofer said it's obvious. If the child will be endangered by lack of milk, then you eat on Yom Kippur. Okay? Now, that's if the child will be endangered by lack of milk. But that does not sound like it's necessarily every case. So now he continues. Nowadays, we have, you can, now bakbuk does not only mean formula, I should say that. Okay, I mean, it sounds like he means formula. I'll get back to expressing milk in advance in a minute. Again, in recent years, we know that mother's milk has special, health qualities that is not in baby's formula. Especially when it comes to antibodies to fight off diseases. Therefore, why doctors advise. That was a recent article about this, I think, in the New York Times. Anyway, with all emphasis, it's critical that their mothers, nurse their children, even if the child is healthy. You don't need special circumstances. Certainly, if the child is weak. And when the baby is very weak, and when he's not able to nurse, even then the mother will express milk and you'll try to get the baby to drink the milk because the mother's milk is so important. So what has he said? He has said that, you can violate Yom Kippur if the infant needs the mother's milk because it's a real health issue for the infant. That he said is one thing. Then he says, and we know that how important mother's milk is in general, even in a normal case, even not in a special case. Does that mean that even in a normal case, we would consider mother's milk to be pikuach nefesh? I should actually tell you that some poskim are prepared to say that, and not even by by Tisha B'av and Yom Kippur, but even by Shabbos. What happens if you have a case of somebody who's nursing, and they say that for various reasons, let's say, I don't know, the baby can't always nurse. I need to express milk. I'm not remembering always the cases. Maybe somebody will remind me of the cases that come up. I get asked these questions a lot, but I don't always remember the specific circumstances. Anyway, can I express milk on Shabbos so that I will have, mother's milk to feed my baby? And it's a real interesting question because expressing milk could be like with your hands, could actually be a Shabbos violation. You can't squeeze an orange to get out the juice. And according to some poskim, it's a doraita violation to express milk the same way it is to get out the milk. But are you allowed to do it if you need to? Because not necessarily that the child is sick, but just in order to make sure that the child has mother's milk. And there actually are some poskim that will say that the ability to give an infant mother's milk even a healthy infant is always considered pikuach nefesh. And you can violate Shabbat, to ensure that the infant gets mother's milk, even if it's, even if you could give formula and so on, if it's even in a normal case. So there definitely are poskim that say that. Now, I should say that, not all cases are that simple because sometimes it's like, well, no, I mean, I do have already milk that I've expressed before Shabbos that's stored up. But if I don't express milk on Shabbos, then I'm concerned, that I won't be able to continue. Like it's not always the case of like the immediate need. Sometimes it's much more of a bigger picture. Immediately I could take care of the needs of my baby, but I need to express milk because I'm thinking big picture, and maybe there'll be a time when I don't have enough milk, so I'll need the milk that I can express now. That makes it a little bit more complicated. I will tell you that what I advise people about this is so interesting. I'll digress for a minute, that there is some people are so much have taken it that the biggest violation of Shabbos, is electricity. That sometimes when women ask poskim about expressing milk on Shabbos, the posik will say, okay, you can do it because of whatever, but don't use an electric device. Use one of those hand pumps, okay? Which, from what I understand, most of the time women hate because they're much more effort than an electric device. But also, I mean, I want to scream when I hear that, because when you're doing it with a hand pump, you're doing it directly. So if you're actually expressing milk with a hand pump, then that's a d'oraita violation. And what I tell people to do is, are you crazy? I said, that's not what you should do. What you should do is you should go ahead and use an electric pump and put it on a timer, and then put the pump on, your breast before the timer clicks on, and then the timer will click on, and then it'll just pump by itself. And you'll have gone, that way you'll be able to pump the milk without the effort, but also without doing it directly. So it'll be much less of a Shabbos issue. Then I was told recently, by the way, that the problem is that some of these devices, they don't go on just when they're plugged in. You have to like push a button, right? So how do you like push a button? You can't put that on a timer. So believe it or not, I say, okay, push a button with a shinoi, with your elbow, but there actually somebody divided. This is not Jewish. Bert, you would have think this was from the same people who made those little shiurim cups that you were talking about. But you can go on Amazon and you can actually buy something that is like a finger device that on a timer that is made like if you want to. Like, I don't know, some devices it needs to push a button, and you want it to do it before you get home. And they actually have devices on timers that will act like a finger and push a button. Anyway, okay, but the only reason to do that is look, if you don't have to do a d'oraita, it's better to not do a d'oraita, but also because not every posek will say that that mother's milk, even in a case of the baby is normally healthy, is pikuach nefesh. Although many poskim do say making sure the baby has mother's milk, even in a normally healthy baby, we're always going to categorize as pikuach nefesh. But as I said, some of the cases are not always cases of immediate. It's like, no, I mean, obviously it's like, I'll be able to feed my baby afterwards, and I have milk that's already expressed. But if I don't express it also on Shabbos, I'm afraid that that'll mean that I'll dry up sooner. So, because cases are a little vaguer, it's better to do it this way with putting something on a timer. Anyway, that was a whole big digression, but it's important to recognize that, how much poskim nowadays are embracing. The Chassam Sofer's case was one in which it was identified that there was a real risk I'm closing the window. I'm sorry, there's outside noise. There was a real risk to the baby without the mother's milk. Nowadays, poskim are much more prepared to embrace the position that mother's milk is always in the category of pikuach nefesh. Okay, so he hasn't yet said that. But he's obviously working in that direction. He starts by quoting the Chassam Sofer, and then he says, and nowadays, whenever a postik says nowadays, what they're doing is that they're going to sort of show what's allowing us to say something new and different is because either the societal circumstances are different nowadays, medical circumstances are different, now new things we didn't know before, and that's going to allow us to make a shift in terms of what our halachic position has been until now. So he's saying nowadays we know how important mother's milk is, okay? And therefore the implicit argument, is seeming to be, although he hasn't said it yet, he says, that that there's always an element of pikuach nefesh in terms of ensuring mother's milk. Nosaf al kach, afilu bivlad bari. Even and now he says, even by a healthy dog, if the milk stops suddenly, so he says that'll lead to like health problems, gorim bayot ikul. So now here's the key line. Okay? Anyway, any infant is in the category of chola she'ein bo sakana. Any infant, anything you have to do for an infant on Shabbos or in any case, you don't need the infant to be sick. Everybody understands that an infant's health could be precarious. So an infant, the standard halacha is we treat an infant like a sick person, like without not life endangerment, but like a sick person, and that gives you a lot of latitude on Shabbat. So, okay, and therefore he says, a nursing woman, even if she's not in pain, but the infant is, so you can be lenient, even maybe on Tisha B'Av you can be lenient, okay? To stop, right? So some of these arguments are needed for Yom Kippur, that if a woman fasts, it could lead to a miscarriage. That's needed for Yom Kippur. If a infant doesn't get the milk, it could be a pikuach nefesh for the infant. Mother's milk might be considered pikuach nefesh for the infant. That's needed for a Yom Kippur argument. But for a Tisha B'Av argument, all you need to say is that it's a case of chola. It could affect the health of the mother. It could affect the health of the infant. And that should be enough to allow for leniency for Tisha B'Av, okay? So right now where we are is the following, is he has sort of laid out, on the one hand, that the standard halacha is pregnant and nursing women do not fast on Tisha B'Av. Do fast on Tisha B'Av, even though sick people do not. And how he has tried to deal with that problem,
Rav
Rabinovich, yeah. How Rav Rabinovich has tried to sort of, say that it's allowed is, even though the halacha says it's not, is one of two ways. Either by saying, well, a sick and a pregnant and a nursing woman are considered sick. Of course, he hasn't dealt with the problem that then the halacha never would have been formulated the way it was. Then the halacha would have been that they didn't have to fast, but the halacha is that they do have to fast. So what we're going to see later, he hasn't said this yet, but I'll sort of, jump ahead, is that he's going to basically say, nowadays our health isn't as good as it used to be in the time of the Gemara, which is like pretty funny if you think about it, because, obviously our health care is infinitely better. But it could also mean that, we eat more, junk food, and we're more indoors and we don't exercise as much. So who knows what? And at some level, it doesn't necessarily matter if it's true or not. It's a way that poskim, anytime there's a nowadays things are different, it's a way that a posek will explain, how do you deal with the fact that we actually do see that, there are health concerns for the mother, for the child, and halacha doesn't seem to be paying attention to it, right? What do you do with that problem? Right? So the only way you can resolve it, you can either just say, I'm not going to bother myself with those health concerns. The halacha is the halacha, end of story. Or you have to find a way to say, and Bert is going back to your point, I don't know whether it historically is true or not, but you have to be able to make the argument and say, something is different nowadays. What's different nowadays? Well, what's different nowadays is either that we know that better about certain things about medicine that we didn't know before. We understand more the danger of going, about, the importance of what mother's milk provides. We understand better, how fasting or earlier, fasting during a pregnancy can lead to a miscarriage or childbirth. We know something better medically, or, we're different. Our health is not as good as it used to be. And through various ways of those, he is basically making the argument that the halacha should be different about Tisha B'Av. So I'm going to skip because I'm a little bit concerned that I'm losing people with the technicalities of it. I don't know. It's just a little type of a different quality share than I gave last time. But let's just go to the punchline, okay? Because maybe that'll hopefully bring everything together. So this is now this last section. Sikum, conclusion. Nisakemet hadvarim. Let's sum it all up. Number one, the Rov HaRishonim Mamado Shel Tisha B'Av Eino El Kashar Isur D'Rabbanan. So according to most, I skipped this section. This was the section right before this, which is Tisha B'Av have a weightier status of a fast day? We know it's not from the Torah, but is it considered to be, well, it's from the Nevi'im and therefore it's weightier? And if it had some objective weight greater than a normal D'Rabbanan, that would create problems. So he makes an argument that Tisha B'Av is no weightier than a standard rabbinic fast day. Okay, so he says the majority of the Rishonim agree that it's not weightier than a standard rabbinic fast day. The lo gazru b'makom choli, and it doesn't apply to sick people. Now that we saw, we already know the halacha that it does not apply to sick people. Okay, but he says amnam and aminagu lachmir bo, aval b'ikaradin yesh makom lakel l'chol shein bo sakana kamo b'shar tzamot. Okay, which is true by a normal sick person. But still, the halacha didn't say it. He says the practice is, we're lenient by somebody who's sick. Okay? Now, that's all nice and well, but we already know that. If somebody says that they have the flu and they're in bed and should they fast on Tisha B'Av, we already know that the answer is no, you don't fast on Tisha B'Av if you're sick. Okay? If it's that type of a serious sickness. But the halacha also said that a pregnant and nursing woman do fast on Tisha B'Av. So how are you going to bridge that gap? So here comes the key line, which he waits till the very end. For kasua poskim hadarot ha'achronim nechlashu la'umot hadarot harishonim. That little line that he sticks at the end after all of the sources is the one that allows him to close the gap. And he says the later generations were not as good in terms of our constitution, our health is not as good as earlier generations. And therefore, it's possible that even though in earlier generations, pregnant women fasted, we're not at that level nowadays. You should go by the actual halacha that sick people don't fast on Tisha B'Av, and implicitly pregnant and nursing women are in the same category. Okay, and particularly because, and this is really, so in these two, there is the slightest concern of health, of life. In these 2 points that I highlighted, you could cut away the whole rest of the tshuva. For people that were getting maybe a little caught up with some of the details, I apologize. But these 2 lines are the really key tshuva. The second highlight is, this is what is pushing me here. What's pushing me is that I know that we're dealing with health of the mother and health of a child, and we have to find a way to address that issue. That has to be our biggest concern, okay? So, because even if it's only a very distant concern of risk of life, we have to weigh that. And that is pushing me to come up with an answer. How am I going to deal with the fact that the sources seem to say that pregnant women and nursing women fast on Tisha B'Av? I'll have to say, okay, maybe that was earlier generations. They were healthier. Now we're not so healthy. Because you have the explicit ruling that says that they fast. And nevertheless, he's finding a way to say, but since we also have a ruling that sick people don't fast, nowadays we'll say that our health isn't as good, and essentially we're in the category of sick people. Okay? And that's what he now sort of says here. Right? That nursing and pregnant women are like a sick person. Okay? And then he says, if they're actually feeling weakness, then it would even be pikuach nefesh for Yom Kippur, and that's what he says. Okay, and then he goes on to speak even on Yom Kippur, and I'll just read one last line: Mishum tsar hatinok ein lemeneket latzum b'tisha b'av. And that's in terms of the mother. And if it's going to, and because of the infant, also a mother should not be fasting on Tisha B'Av. And then there are cases that could even lead to pikuach nefesh. All right. So that is basically his tshuva, where again he starts with a source that says pregnant and nursing women don't fast on fast on Tisha B'Av. Sick people do not fast. He clearly is motivated by the fact that to fast is a health concern for the mother and also for the infant. And mother's milk is extremely important for a nurse, if in the case of a nursing mother. And without really, I would say honestly, directly, like he almost like quotes the source at the beginning that says nursing women fast at the beginning, and then never references it again. And then just says, okay, look, it says in Shulchan Aruch nursing women fast. Now I'm going to tell you why nursing women shouldn't fast. Because sick people don't fast, and a nursing woman is like a sick person, and because the mother's milk is important to the infant, and the infant will be in pain. And once that's true, nursing women don't fast, right? So it's again what I think is fascinating about this is the way in which it's not like brilliant halachic argumentation. It's not like the sources seem pretty darn explicit to say that there is fasting, but he clearly is so motivated because of the health concern that he is going to find a way to just sort of like bracket it and make his argument. So anyway, I don't know. I didn't leave really any time. It's already 12 o'clock. But is there any thoughts or reflections or feedback before we sort of wrap up?
Rabbi, are you concluding that also pregnant women do not?
His position is that I didn't read that very end. But yeah, I mean, he would say that a pregnant woman does not fast. Again, let's not talk about Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is a doraita, and it's you have to clearly argue that it's in the pikuach nefesh category. But he doesn't exactly give a minimum amount for a pregnant woman in terms of Tisha B'Av. But I think he would say that as soon as a woman is feeling that her health is affected, by being pregnant, that if she shouldn't have to fast. I'm trying to look right now. Hold on. I don't know. I have to read it a little bit closer if what he says about a pregnant woman before the 5th month. But his argument does seem to be that any pregnant woman is considered to be a sick. So, and I think he would say that my sense is that he would say that when it comes to Tisha B'Av, any pregnant woman would who's feeling a concern for her health would not fast on Tisha B'Av.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts or reflections? Bert, do you want to say something? I can't hear you. You're on mute. Still on mute, Bert. Okay. I guess we're going to have, oh, there you go.
Okay. No, this speaks to something which, is multiple shiurim, is the halachic process. Before you found Rabinovich's, sock, or whatever you want to call it, you said you were hesitant because of, the specificity, of what it says in the Shulchan Aruch,
Right.
but at some point or another, I mean, you felt you had to depend upon somebody else as opposed to coming to these same conclusions on your own.
Yeah, it's true. And look, and that is that because it's so explicit in the Shulchan Aruch, and um, Yeah, it was a lot easier for me to poskin this way once I found that Rev Rabinovich was poskening that way. In the end, I am so anchored in a world of sources that to just without having any source that says it and just make the argument. I mean, if it's something that is a real medical discovery, like the issue about pikuach nefesh and about what leads to miscarriage and so on, you don't need a source that says it. But if it's like just a general argument about pregnant and nursing women and not anything that is a specific new medical discovery and just sort of saying, well, we're not as strong as we used to be and so on, you know, at least me, I don't know if this is good or bad, probably bad, but at least me, I was very strengthened by the fact that Rav Rabinovich said it, you know? So if that's your question, yeah, I mean, God bless him that he didn't need, he also quoted here and there, like a little strand of a source there and a strand of a source there. You don't want to totally be saying what you're saying out of nothing. But yeah, it was so explicit that it was harder for me to make that leap, and I was glad to have the source that helped me do it. All right, we're going to have to end here. I do have another actually meeting. Somebody's waiting for me. I'm sorry if that went a little, got a little too and more involved in the details than it has been in the past. And I look forward to meeting everybody next week. And everybody should have an easy and meaningful fast.
Thank you, Ron.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But it does say that for holy lo gazvina lechola.
Say that again.
What
are
the
you
main
asking?
point is that even in the Gemara it says for a chola you don't make these halachas. The gzeirot don't apply to people who are sick. Nowadays, pregnant women probably say, "Well, I'm not sick, I'm pregnant." But in those days, I guess they thought that pregnant women were sick or could be sick. So it didn't apply to every case, with just the general rule.
Yeah, I just, as I say, it just is, I don't know if they're sick, but there's certainly. I mean, part of this is as well is that I know that uh, many of the women, I guess, should speak to this. Is that it's not just that you feel weak. It's just you can feel real pain or other things like that if you're not treating this well. Carol, what do you say?
Yes, I mean, especially in the early months of pregnancy, you could be throwing up every day. You could get dehydrated easily. It's not so much that you're actually sick, but you need to prevent being sick. You need to prevent being actively sick. And I think they shouldn't fast. If
Right. I'll drop that to a note to Rabbi Linzer. I think you're right. They're right that that pregnant women can get dehydrated. That could be really a serious problem.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to fast because I have a problem with low blood pressure and dehydration, and I'm not. I no longer can fast.
Yeah, me too. I drink even in Yom Kippur very small amounts, but I do drink.
But still I have to do something. And the same thing with nursing mothers. If the baby is not nursing, that means that the mother is in danger of getting a breast infection. So that milk needs to be taken out, whether it's through a pump or some other method. That milk needs to be expressed. I never heard of that thing that expressing manually is the same as squeezing a lemon or an orange. That's such a foreign notion to me. To me, that goes a little too far.
Yeah, that's something that
the mother and the baby being separated.
You should have mentioned that to Rabbi Linzer. I think that the idea that the danger involved is more substantial than some people thought to begin with, because as I say, dehydration is a very serious thing. I've been hospitalized for that.
Yeah, and nursing mothers need a certain amount of nutrition. I mean, her body's going to be depleted to feed the infant before she feels it.
And then it's also this pain too, if you don't express.
Yeah. If you don't express it, there's going to be pain. You'll get mastitis. That's what mastitis is. That's when the breast tissues become infected when the milk is not adequately taken out. The milk is still good. I was a leche leader, so I know. I used to counsel mothers who wanted to nurse their babies. especially their doctors who said, no, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to be an Italian peasant? Believe me, 40 years ago, there was a lot of negativity about women nursing their babies.
Gloria, when she had Shoshana, that was 40 years or so ago, also went to La Leche, and stuff like that, because, it wasn't necessarily quite as popular unless you were in those circles.
Oh yeah, yeah. Actually, my oldest child is 55, and I was part of the first group in Queens that went to La Leche League meetings.
Well,
Actually, in
that's
Forest Hills, we had a group in Forest Hills.
that's excellent. All right, listen, everybody. Oh, there's no everybody anywhere. Have a meaningful fast.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mom.
Have a
Okay, Anna.
meaningful fast.
Okay,
Okay,
bye-bye.
bye-bye.
Okay, bye bye.